Monasteries on the wall here are all Serbian monasteries, some of which have been destroyed or nearly destroyed by NATO, and they're in Kosovo, some of them. And the Peć Patriarchate, Gračanica, and so we have in each room pictures of monasteries from a different country. I want to say something about this particular icon also, because Heiko painted this icon for me. It's the founders of the unmercenary physician tradition in the church. Now, most people don't realize that the tradition of unmercenary physicians was founded by 3 women, although they're never portrayed in the icon with the men. And I think that might be a little bit of Turkish influence or something. But Hermione, the daughter of Philip the Deacon, was actually the patron saint of medicine in Constantinople. The Zinaida and Philinella were cousins of Apostle Paul, sisters of Jason, the first bishop of Tarsus. And as many of you will know, Tarsus was an extremely important city, an imperial city. The citizens were citizens of Rome. It was to Tarsus that Cleopatra went when she wanted to meet Mark Antony. And Hermione, the daughter of Philip the Deacon, was also a New Testament prophet. But she founded the Xenodochia, the sort of, I guess, what we'd call drop-in clinics, particularly for travelers and strangers. The work was carried on later by Paula of Palestine and by the 2 saints Melanie, the grandmother and the granddaughter. But it was Hermione, the daughter of Philip the Deacon, who began the tradition. Saints Philinella and Zinais in Tarsus, Paul came from a wealthy family. As you know, he went off to Jerusalem to study with Gamaliel, the most famous teacher of his day in Judaism. And Philinella and Zinais went to what we would call an academy or university. In other words, philosophers would set up stalls someplace in the city and try to attract students. The 2 sisters were attracted to the disciples of Hippocrates of Kos, and they studied medicine with him. And Hippocrates, as you know, tried to render medicine scientific, and even developed a little bit of pharmacopoeia. I think he used olive leaves for what we now call bacteria, and oregano for what we now call viruses, and for sore throats. And he tried to follow a scientific approach. And the 2 sisters then learned. They had a substantial amount of money, so they were in the Taurus mountain range. There were several medicinal hot springs, but they were all privately owned, and only the wealthy or the upper class made use of them. So the 2 sisters chipped in and bought one of the medicinal hot springs, and as we like to say, they Canadianized it. They opened it to all citizens of every rank and level, and they set up a clinic, and they followed the rules of Hippocrates, and of course used prayer and faith as well. And Zinais became quite famous as a mother confessor. She was a great spiritual counselor. Philinella is actually credited with founding the concept of gynecology, of a separate medicine for women. Zinais was particularly interested in children's medicine, but above all, she was a spiritual healer and a spiritual teacher. And they were martyred, of course. So many of the early great Christian leaders were martyred. These women were among those great women of the church that make us sorrowful that women were excluded so much from their roles of teaching and leadership for so long. But when St. Samson, the guest receiver, was commissioned by the emperor in, I think, the 500s, to build a modern hospital in Constantinople, he called upon some of the ideas of St. Philinella. And so their legacy lasted, but the icon had not been painted at least since the fall of Constantinople. And when we were in Zagreb, in Constantinople, we managed to find the types for the icons. And in Thessaloniki, we found the lives of the saints. And Heiko then painted the icon especially at my request. And we since used it, and We call them the mothers of modern medicine. A few years ago, when I was giving a lecture for the Fraser Valley Women's Association, I took this icon and based my talk on these three women and St. Nina of Georgia, the Holy Apostle Nina of Georgia. And by the end of it, several of the women were in the medical services, either as nurses, receptionists, or even in two cases, medical doctors. And every one of them asked for a copy of the icon to put in the coffee room or in the reception room of their offices or in the doctor's office. So we ended up making around 37 copies of it and having them mounted. And they're now in various medical centers around the greater Fraser Valley. So I just wanted to not pass this up in talking about Heiko Schlipper and the icons, and shaming people for not venerating these three women, along with the other unmercenary physicians, and for not recognizing and realizing the enormous contribution that women have made in the church, in society, in culture, in the world. So.